Welcome. Today we're going to be looking at connecting Prusa's MMU2 to the SKR 1.4. To do this, we will need to enable the communications pins in the Arduino source library, define the MMU2 features in Marlin, and finally install the MMU2 on the printer and wire it to the controller board. So let's get started. The SKR 1.4 and 1.4 Turbo have an unused serial bus we can take advantage of. It is typically used for the optional Wi-Fi chip, but we're going to repurpose it to our MMU2 serial port and use the I2C pin header for our connections. To do this, we need to edit the hardware serial.h header file found in the Arduino libraries. The file is located under your user profile, .platform.io, packages, framework Arduino LPC 176X, cores Arduino. So you want to open it in an editor. I prefer Notepad++ for this. And locate the section where the UARTs are defined. We want to use UART3 for the MMU2. Pardon me while I fix a typo in the file. We will need to define which pins we are using to transmit and receive, and which port on the chip we want to use for this UART. Looking at the board pinout diagram on BigTreeTech's GitHub, we can see the I2C header has a 5-volt positive pin, a ground pin, and then pin 0.0 and 0.1. These last two will be our communication pins. If we look back at the header file, we can see that pin 0 and pin 1 are already set for us, so we don't need to make any changes there. We can also see that the port number is already set to 0. The number to the left of the decimal on the diagram is the port, so no changes are required here either. We do need to make a change to the function number, however. So we will look at the data sheet for the LP176X series chips and find table 80, which has the pin connection and function information. And we can see that pins 0 and 1 are set as serial transmit and receive when the function number is set to 2. The numbers in the data sheet are in binary, so we will make this change and then save and close the file. Next, we'll move to VS Code and make some changes to our firmware. After loading up the Marlin firmware in VS Code, we need to find the HAL.h header file for the LPC1768. This 69 uses the same file. So the file is located under Marlin, Source, HAL, LPC1768, HAL.h. Double-click to open, and you will find two serial ports already defined. We're going to copy serial port 2 and paste it for our new port 3. Go through and change all the references to serial port 2 to serial port 3, and my serial 1 to my serial 2. And then I also added another else if to check that we aren't using the same serial ID for port 3 as we are for port 2. And then save your changes and open the configuration.h file next. We have several changes to make here. First, we want to add our new serial port. So to do this, we want to find where the serial ports are defined. And you'll see 0 port 0, 0 port 2. And so we'll want to copy serial port 2 and paste it just below and change the 2 to a 3. And then we're going to define the port as 2. Alright, next we'll find the section for the Prusa Multi-Material Unit V2. And we're going to uncomment the defined Prusa MMU2 line. You want to notice that we also need to set the number of extruders to 5 and enable the nozzle park feature. So we'll go back up and change our extruders from 1 to 5. And I already have the nozzle park enabled in this firmware, so we don't need to visit it here. Save your changes and open configuration.adv.8. Here we'll make our last firmware edits and then compile our new firmware. So if you have trouble finding where the MMU2 section is, you can use Control F and then just type in MMU2 because it's a fair way down in the code. So you notice it says for 32-bit boards to consult your HAL for available serial ports. Well, we've already done that, and we set our port as serial 3, so we just need to change M serial to serial 3. We're also going to set our reset pin here. So the I2C header doesn't have an available pin to use, so we'll just go to the adjacent SPI header and take advantage of pin 26, which isn't used for anything. And so we'll just set reset pin to pin 0.26 or 0_26. And then the other stuff here is for loading and unloading filament when you're swapping filament out. These values will probably need to be adjusted, but for now we're just going to leave the defaults as is. And that's it. We can go ahead and start compiling. What we'll want to do is hit the trash can icon to clear out all the libraries, and then we'll hit the check mark to go ahead and compile our new firmware. So we'll let that run. And come back in just a second once it's done. So we've got our firmware compiled. So what we're going to do is go to your output folder location and grab the firmware.bin file. So if you just, wherever your firmware is located, go to PIO, build, LPC 1769 or 68, firmware.bin, you want to copy that and paste it into your micro SD card. And then you can just eject the card, and next it's on to the printer. So here we are at the printer. Go ahead and mount the MMU2 unit where you want it. I have mine placed on the top of the frame for now. Connect the power and data cables to their respective ports. Screw everything down. And then connect the PTFE tube to the extruder inlet. Next, go to the controller board, and we're going to connect the power and data cables. I installed a JST connector on the end of my power cable so I could take advantage of always on fan headers. So just plug that in there, and then I'm going to plug the fan back in. There we go. And then we'll want to grab the end of the data cable, and we're going to need to make some changes to the pin connections here. So first we want to remove the brown wire, which is our reset pin. You just carefully lift the tab, try not to break it. And then you want to slide the brown wire into a single DuPont housing, because this is going to go on a different pin header. And then we also need to move the remaining data cables wires over one pin in the housing to accommodate that ground pin on the I2C header that we're not using. There's an extra white wire here that doesn't actually get used for anything, so we're just going to place it on the outside position. Also, make sure you don't swap the order of the green and the white wires. Leave the blue wire alone. That's your 5 volt. It's going to stay in that bottom position. and then we'll put the unused white wire in that top position that's not actually going to be connected to anything. So there's our I2C connector. The bottom pin is the ground, so we'll just slide that connector on, blue wire down, and then the brown wire for reset. Top right pin on the SPI header is pin 26, so we'll just connect that up. Then we'll just do a little bit of cable management to tidy things up in the case. Snip the ends off, and then we'll put our cover back on. So now the cover's on, we've put our card into the firmware slot. Once the cover's on, install the new micro SD card with your new firmware in the slot and turn on power to the printer. Let's see it boot up here, and we're going to have a menu option now for MMU. So we can go in there and select load filament. I'm going to load to position 3, and we'll see the selector will start homing itself, and then the idler will rotate, and we'll start loading. And there it is. Next, we're going to preheat our nozzle for PLA, and then we're going to see if we can get the filament to load to the nozzle. So let this warm up. Then go back into our MMU menu, go to load to nozzle, select filament 3 again, and watch everything work. I had disconnected power here, which is why it's rehoming. Normally it wouldn't do this. So it select position 3, the red light comes on, and you can watch the filament go into the PTFE tube. There it goes. And then in a few seconds you'll see it start coming out of the nozzle. There you go. So that's all there is to connecting. There's a lot of tweaking that'll need to be done afterwards, and I will possibly post videos as I go through experimenting with it. There also is worth noting that Big Tree Tech is releasing their own version of the MMU2 controller board that will use their removable drivers. So that's something interesting to keep a look at, and I'll probably end up picking one up and experimenting with it as well. It'll be running its own firmware. It's not going to use the Prusa firmware. So be interesting to see how that works out. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you like the video, click like, click subscribe. I hope to do more videos in the future. Thanks for watching.